Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
20 minutes of reading a day paves the way to success. When watching shows together, ask questions and summarize episodes to support comprehension and vocabulary. It's the quality of content that makes a difference. For more information, readjax.org.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a new rapid response mental health program for kids in crisis, ages 2 to 17. Then, whether it's divorce, child custody, or adoption, family law is complicated and consequential. We'll tell you about a free new program that can help navigate the courts. And an underground clue to the health of the St. John's. The Riverkeeper updates us on the state of submerged grasses. Plus, local author Hurley Winkler shares her summer of journaling, personal exploration, and 100 swims. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. As the 2024 presidential race shifts into high gear, Republican nominee Donald Trump is making his first campaign stop in Wisconsin since the RNC last month. Chuck Quirmbach of member station WUWM reports Trump will hold a town hall meeting today in the city of La Crosse.
Former President Donald Trump is expected to visit western Wisconsin a few weeks after the Democratic ticket of Vice President Kamala Harris and running mate Minnesota Governor Tim Walz campaigned in the region. University of Wisconsin-La Crosse political scientist Anthony Chergowski says both campaigns may be partly pursuing independent voters.
In western Wisconsin, there do seem to be a number of voters who take the unique attributes of the candidates into account. And there do seem to be a fair number of voters here who don't have strong ties to either political party.
Trump's visit comes a day after his running mate, J.D. Vance, campaigned in Wisconsin. Democrat Tim Walz plans to be in the state on Labor Day. For NPR News, I'm Chuck Quirmbach in Milwaukee.
Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz are continuing their bus tour with a stop in Georgia today. On Wednesday, Walz addressed the International Association of Firefighters Convention in Boston.
Every hero deserves to come home at the end of every shift. And know this, we see your noble courage. We're forever grateful to you for going above and beyond to keep all of us safe. And we're committed to building a future that you and your families deserve.
Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance is scheduled to speak to firefighters in Boston today. Harris and Walz will record their first joint interview of their campaign this afternoon. It will air at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on CNN. Telegram founder Pavel Durov has been indicted in Paris for failing to stop criminal activity on the messaging app. NPR's Bobby Allen reports the tech billionaire has also been ordered to remain in France.
Paris prosecutors allege that as CEO of the popular messaging app Telegram, Pavel Durov has allowed the distribution of child sexual abuse photos and illegal drug trafficking to thrive on the app. Authorities have released Durov on a $5 million bond. He will be subjected to court monitoring. French judicial officials say he is not permitted to leave France. Durov was born in Russia, but is a citizen of both the United Arab Emirates and France. The reclusive 39-year-old billionaire rarely grants interviews and often posts bare-chested photos of himself on social media. Durov started Telegram in 2013. It has more than 900 million users, many drawn to the app for its lax rules. If convicted, Durov faces up to 10 years in prison. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
This is NPR News in Washington.
And you're hearing WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. After bipartisan backlash, Governor Ron DeSantis says he's pulling the plug on a state Department of Environmental Protection plan to build golf courses, hotels, and other amenities in state parks. The governor also distanced himself from the plan, saying to reporters Wednesday he hadn't seen it. The news is being greeted with caution, like this from Audubon, Florida's Julie Rathmel.
I think that there were a lot of folks who were very direct, loud and clear, that they weren't eager to entertain these ideas now or at any point. And so it will certainly be interesting to see what ideas come back in 4 months' time.
DeSantis called DEP's plans half-baked and said they were leaked. The department posted the plans on its website and on social media. State officials were set to hold meetings this week before those were abruptly canceled amid the backlash. Construction is set to begin next week on a busy roadway in Jacksonville Beach. The Florida Department of Transportation says a resurfacing project along Butler Boulevard from the Intracoastal Waterway Bridge to 3rd Street will begin on Tuesday, September 3rd. The project will also include lighting and signage improvements along that stretch of road. It's in the upper 70s in Jacksonville now, up to 90 this afternoon. The feels-like temperature would be 101 for today. Chance of storms later.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations and from your part-time controller, U.S.-based staff helping nonprofits with their accounting, from bookkeeping to financial reporting and analysis to CFO services. yptc.com/NPR. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, at a moment of crisis in child mental health, a local pilot program aims to expedite services for kids ages 2 to 17. A program official joins us in studio to take your calls and questions. Later in the program, free legal help for family court cases, and what a local author learned about the therapeutic properties of swimming. But first, kids as young as 2 and well through the teen years are experiencing high rates of depression and anxiety, but getting help quickly has remained a stumbling block. Here to tell us about a new virtual rapid response program is Jeanine Hoff, a licensed clinical social worker who works with Nemours Children's Health. Hey, Jeanine.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Before we get to the program specifics, describe the parameters of the challenge currently as you see it.
Well, what we see now is there are a lot of kids who need help in all different aspects. It's not just the depression and anxiety, but we see a lot of attention issues, a lot of behavioral issues. Parents have concerns, but they don't know what the right route is to go, how to get services, how to get help. And when they do try, they're meeting all sorts of, stumbling blocks, all sorts of issues, whether it's the insurance or not being able to afford it, or, availability is a huge issue. And so that's how this program was developed.
Mm-hmm. And the problem often is an immediacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to get that care within a time frame. And that can be particularly urgent for kids.
Yeah, especially for younger children, especially for children who are struggling in schools and stuff. Parents have a hard time getting those services quickly. Sometimes they'll call and we'll put you on a waiting list, or it's 6 to 8 weeks before we can get you in. And so that's how we kind of structured this program, to get children in faster and help expedite the process to get kids services as quickly as possible.
It's one of those things that we hear about anecdotally, but I think until a parent actually has a child with a need and they're just shocked to realize that somebody might say to them, hey, we'll have a bed for you, in weeks and weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to take that long. So this program relies on kind of the telehealth model.
Yes.
Yeah. Explain how that works.
So the program is called PATH. We piloted it about 1 year ago. So it's our 1 year anniversary, and it was developed to get families access as quickly as possible. So PATH stands for Pediatric Acute Telemental Health. And so we do it through telehealth. We do it through like a Zoom platform, similar to Zoom. And what we do is we assess a child. It can take about 90 minutes, and we do a full assessment. We will check everything from their school, family history, medical history, how they do socially, and then kind of work from there. What are the parents seeing? And then we make a determination. Should they get testing done? Do they just need therapy? Do they need a combination of therapy and medication? Whatever the needs are. And then for us in our program, because we are a short-term program in that we provide short-term interventions, we can see a child for up to 3 follow-up sessions while we help connect them with community providers. And we have established a great relationship with tons of providers throughout Northeast Florida. We cover 5 counties right now. And so we kind of get them wherever they need to be.
And as a clinician, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, and you've been working in child mental health for how long?
I've been working in child mental health for several years. I worked with the mobile response team in Duval. I did St. John's as well, and I worked inpatient psych. And just seeing kids in crisis that didn't need to get to that point. We were seeing them when, the parents couldn't get them in or they couldn't get them services. And that was like really impactful. And I worked with adults previously, but seeing the impact on kids, it's like if we can get it early, we don't have to have them go into adulthood, struggling as much as they were.
What are some of the impacts of not getting that treatment in an immediate way, or at least in a short-term way?
So the way I describe it is it's like a balloon, and you have a balloon that's full of air and you slowly let out the air, and before you know it, there's no air in the balloon. And that's what happens with families. They don't even realize that things are starting to crumble little by little, and then before they know it, the kid is in some kind of crisis, or the family is having a really difficult time getting whatever it is that they need. The child's having behavioral issues at home, in school, doesn't want to go to school. And so we try and get it as early as possible. Early intervention is the way to go. And so we try and get them as much as they need as quickly as possible.
And so you're kind of putting together mental health as well as behavioral health. And so which in your practice do you see more of, and who needs more help in those circumstances? Is it the child or is it the parent?
Sometimes it's both, right? With our younger kids, we do see 2 to 17, and our 2 to 5, 6-year-olds, a lot of the services are done directly with the parents, helping them implement behavior modifications, how to manage transitions in the home, transitioning from one activity to the other, how to implement behavior and consequences and positive reinforcement. And then with the older kids, we're seeing a little bit more mood stuff. And so for me, I carry the morning afternoon shift. And so I see a lot of the younger kids. My colleagues who do the evening shifts are seeing the, middle schools to teenagers, and they're doing a lot more of the depression and the anxiety and the school stress, applications for college, all of those kinds of things, that whole process. So we run the gamut. And what's interesting about Nemours is we're not just seeing depression, anxiety, and behavior. We're also seeing kids with co-occurring medical disorders. And so getting them services is a lot harder because a lot of clinicians don't know how to treat someone who maybe have, diabetes and it's a new diagnosis, or are struggling with sleep disorders, or, any kind of epilepsy, medical stuff happening. And so we kind of give them a well-rounded service because we have our medical team and we have our mental health professionals together kind of collaborating and figuring out what's the best course of treatment for them.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about a new virtual rapid response program at Nemours to deal with children who are having an acute mental health or perhaps behavioral crisis. And if you have a question or a comment, you can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can tag us on social media. I thought it was interesting, Jeanine, just this morning on Morning Edition, they were talking about a new warning from the Surgeon General about parents' mental health, sort of part of this evolving crisis, as has been described among the youth, parents trying to parent in those same difficult situations and maybe not getting the support that they need. How does that fit into what you all do?
It's fascinating because when we started this program, we said, let's have a list of providers for parents just in case. And we refer parents out all the time. Sometimes we have to refer family therapy because sometimes the situation is so disruptive to the family at whole that it causes a lot of conflicts between parents. Sometimes parenting styles are different. And so the approach, we have to say, you guys have to be on the same team. And then it causes conflict with the other children. And so even when we do behavior modification, we say this has to be applied to the whole family, not just to the child who's struggling, but to everybody. And you'll see a big difference. And the feedback has been tremendous. And so even with parents in general, we've referred a lot of parents to therapy, a lot of parents to psychiatry for an evaluation. Maybe they need help with medication management, stuff like that.
Wow. And so do you see this as connected? A lot of people draw this dividing line pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. Do you consider that a valuable metric, or do you think this is just sort of part of an overall incline in the need for these programs?
Well, if we look at just what's been happening in the last 4 years or so, suicide rates have gone up, which is terrible given all the advocacy, all the work that's being done out there, there's much more access to mental health care now than there was 5-10 years ago. And yet we're still seeing that happen. I hear a lot of parents when I'm doing my assessments say, well, during the pandemic, then my child didn't go to school and they were home, they became kind of isolated. So we hear it all the time. And I don't know if it's parents become more aware or they're able to observe it more because they're with their children more, but it is common that we hear about the pandemic. And even though, kids are back in school and they've been in school for 2 or 3 years, the impact has lasted.
We've got a call. Shannon in Murray Hill. Good morning, Shannon. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. First of all, as someone locally that works in mental health, thank you for this program. I really, really appreciate that. And secondly, will this program be able to Baker Act children that they assess, or will they be referred on to another provider if you guys see that that's needed?
So that's an interesting question because we were not designed to be a crisis program originally. But what happens is we get a lot of parents who will call in and are concerned about children self-harming, children in crisis. So as soon as they call, they immediately get the information for mobile response and for the ED. We send a lot of kids to Wolfson's to be evaluated. But sometimes the parents don't realize it. And so when we assess the kid and we see, okay, they're at risk for harm, we cannot safety plan with them, they're resistant, they're, whatever it may be, then we talk to the parents and we say, this is what needs to be done. Sometimes we tell them you have to call mobile response, but most of the time we say to them, you've already been assessed, let's get them to the ED. We talk with the parents.
And the ED being?
The emergency department.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's so used to being the ER, now we call it the ED. And so we refer them over. Parents, we call Wolfson's and we'll say we have a child on their way to be assessed, and we say to the parents, we're going to check in with you, and if we don't hear from you, we will send out a wellness check. And parents have pretty much every single time without fail taken their kids in, and about half of them have been admitted, and the other half have been assessed and determined, okay, you need intensive services, and that helps them get into like a Baptist Bridge program and such.
I'm interested to hear you say that this was not initially designed as a crisis program. So how did that evolve?
So what we found was what the need was. As we got into it, because we were just expecting parents to just call and say, I need help with therapy, I need services. And so we figured that, okay, that's how we'd go. But as we started getting calls in, all of a sudden it started to evolve. And we've evolved from where we started a year ago to where we are now, saying, okay, we are seeing so many different things. And it's much bigger than we had ever anticipated.
And so, as we mentioned at the beginning, this is a pilot program. There is some expectation or hope that this will expand. And you have some news about that, in terms of where it's going to go next.
Yeah, so we piloted in Northeast Florida. So we cover Duval, Clay, St. John's, Nassau, and Baker County. And little by little, parents from other counties will call in. We've had, Putnam and Columbia County, and we don't turn people away. We never say, we will do the research. We will help connect you which whatever way we can to whatever local services there are. But our goal was to make it, Nemours is in 6 states. So let's see how far we can expand it. So now we just got the funding to expand it into the Panhandle, which is in desperate need of services. A lot of it is rural, so there's not many providers out there. So it's the ability to get them connected where they are. And sometimes they have to do it through telehealth. Sometimes they have to travel, but families are willing to do what they need to get their children help. And we also cover southern Georgia.
Okay. So do you see, I mean, there's been pushback, I think, on some of the need growing. I think some people believe that maybe we're pathologizing regular behavior. I saw a study that Nemours did called "What's Worrying America's Kids," and one of the findings was that more than 1 in 3 kids worry at least once a week. And even reading that, I don't want to be one of these like dismissive Gen Xers, but I was like, is that really significant? I mean, to worry once a week, what's the level that really merits that or reaches that threshold in your mind for concern?
So for me, I go with whatever is disruptive to their lives, to their everyday functioning, right? We don't need to give everyone a specific diagnosis. People who are stressed don't necessarily have anxiety, but they do have stress. And sometimes they need help to figure out how to manage that stress. A lot of people don't have natural coping mechanisms because it just doesn't happen. We don't figure those things out unless we have to. And some people have coping mechanisms that they don't even realize that those are coping mechanisms. And so we kind of help them feel things out. Not everyone has clinical depression or things like that. But if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, yeah, figure it out. And that's the interesting thing about this program is there are people that we don't need to refer out and that we will see them and we say, you know what, if this takes 5 sessions with us, we'll extend past the 3 follow-up because there's no need to have you start all over again. We'll help you get through, and it's been very successful. It's just getting kids that comfort and the tools that they need, their little toolbox and their mental toolbox to help manage some of the stresses that come with schoolwork or with, friends in school or social groups or lack of social groups or needing social skills, whatever it may be, we help them get where they need to be going.
We've got a call from Carolina on the South Side. Good morning, Carolina. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this very important topic. I appreciate you. I'm a pediatrician in town, and a couple of things come up with this situation. A lot of times children are going through panic, anxiety attacks, and parents want us to fix it right away. So I have a couple of questions, and maybe you mentioned this in the beginning. How can we refer you quickly so that I have my staff having information that they can pass on when we're busy in the practice seeing other patients, and we just can't handle that right away because we're overwhelmed ourselves with seeing regular visits. Secondly, one of the challenges we have found is when we give them all these crisis hotlines, Baptist Connect, and things like that. Once they speak with someone, they're either referred to the emergency room, and I understand this is probably going to change things or has been changing things, but then they're quickly referred, oh, yes, we'll set you up tomorrow, and they either don't take their insurance, they're closed, they get a recording, and it's a challenge for parents, which is extraordinarily frustrating. Then they have the child that's been sent home, not Baker acted, not hospitalized, and then it gets worse. So do you have some solutions for that? And I guess I have to keep listening on and listen for your contact information. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you are a Nemours patient and you have the Nemours app, you can actually schedule with us directly. So that's one. So if you have that, you can just go on and schedule a telemental health appointment and you can speak with us. Usually with the app, it's about a 3-day wait. But if you call the 904-697-3600 number, you can get with us. If you need to be seen that day or the next morning, you can get in with a provider. We also have a QR code. It's on the Nemours website. If you search PATH, Nemours PATH, you will be able to scan the QR and it will connect you to more information or to make the appointment and such. We're also going around, if you want the QR code in your office, we go to pediatricians' offices and we are providing that information so that they can just rip it off like a script pad and hand it to parents, and then the parents can call. Now, that's interesting what you mentioned about not being able to get with a provider. We actually do the work with the patient. So if I have a TRICARE patient, That's their insurance, and they need the referrals. And we say, okay, these are the providers within your area. We ask them if they have transportation, if they need telehealth, if they need therapy and medication management. And we tailor it down to these are the providers that we should be contacting, and then we actually help facilitate that process.
So you help find somebody that takes their insurance?
Yes, that takes their insurance. We do not give them anyone who will turn them down. And now insurance changes sometimes without notice. And so we always say, if you contact someone and you go through the process and they no longer take your insurance, please call us. Please message us. And that's the thing. They have access to us once they're our patient to message us, and we respond pretty quickly, usually within a few hours, to help them. Okay, I actually have Spanish-speaking patients whose parents, they don't speak English and they can't get that appointment because there's no provider when they get on. So we actually have a list of Spanish-speaking providers. That way we will call them and say, I have a patient. I need you to set up an intake with a Spanish-speaking clinician, and they do it, and then we call the parents and we help set it up for them. So we help remove a lot of those barriers. One of our biggest groups of patients that we see is autism, and getting them a provider, whether it's behavioral therapy, helping them set up ABA, or just regular therapy, getting them a provider that accepts their insurance and also specializes in working with children with autism.
And you had said before the program, when we were just talking, that you see a lot of patients with ADHD more and more. And you were talking a little bit about kind of the cultural pressures that contribute to that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I would say about 60% of the patients that I see have some kind of ADHD or have been tested or need testing, or that the parents are seeing impulsivity. They're seeing hyperactivity. They're seeing inattentiveness, but they're also seeing the emotional dysregulation, the emotional outbursts. The kids go from happy to this is the worst day ever, kind of extreme moods. And so, it's really a cultural shift. You can look back when we were growing up, you didn't really see it as often, I don't think, or maybe we weren't noticing it as much. But I think now with everything is so immediate. You want to listen to a song, just go on your phone. You can hear whatever song you want. You don't have to wait for the record to come out and go to the record store. You want to watch a movie, it's immediate. You want to play a game, you need to look up something for a report for school. You just look it up. You can go on the computer. You don't have to go ride your bike to the library, go through the Dewey Decimal System and all of that. So everything is so immediate that even naturally as adults too, our attention span is shrinking. We have very limited time, to focus on different things. And so it's becoming more and more common. And so we're helping parents not only manage that, but also get the diagnosis, get whatever necessary testing. If they need medication, then we help them, get through that process. We help educate them on medication and medication options. We do have a lot of parents who don't want to try medications. So then we also try other behavioral interventions. We help them manage executive function. We help them manage the transitions and, how to manage the tantrums or whatever comes along with it, and schedule the children so that schedules work with kids with ADHD. Okay, now it's homework time and you have 15 minutes and then you're going to take a 3-minute break. So we help them go through that whole process.
It's interesting. One of the trends that I thought was kind of neat, I was reading about recently, I think it was in the New York Times, but it was a story about the movie Inside Out and how the characters in that film, which portray different emotions, have helped people talk about having healthy emotions that may feel unhealthy, or kind of create characters about like anxiety or anger in a way that allows kids to sort of interpret and better talk about the feelings that they're having, and maybe understand that they are natural feelings, that they can be part of a normal, healthy, functioning life.
Yeah, emotions are natural. They're healthy. It is healthy to be sad. It is healthy to be happy. You can't know happiness without knowing sadness. And anxiety is a part of life. Sometimes anxiety helps us. It helps us be successful. It helps us study. It helps motivate us. It's when it becomes disruptive. And the anxiety is there to protect us. And that's how anxiety and fear in the movie, they kind of go hand in hand. They kind of like, oh, I like you. You're my friend. Because that's what it's there to protect us. It's when it becomes overwhelming, or when it disrupts your daily activities, or when, it becomes too much to bear and then you stop doing stuff. that's where it becomes a problem. And you know what? I think anxiety was the best portrayed in that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard it's really great. I've got an email question from Brittany I want to get to. It just says, I'm a public school parent, and Duval County Public Schools just came out with a Know the Line campaign. They discuss making sure parents talk to their students about their communication with teachers, discouraging physical contact, not meeting alone with their teachers. And she says, while I appreciate the focus on student safety, I worry the lack of support that students will have in the classroom. Is Nemours doing any community outreach to schools, perhaps even seeing students at schools?
So we don't see students at schools because in each county there's an established program. Like in Duval County, they have full service schools that provides therapy to children that are referred to their schools, and they come in and such. But we do outreach. We know we are talking with the school board and things like that to educate them on the program. I think schools have a lot more support now than they ever have. Where we do see some challenges are in private schools and charter schools because they're not equipped. They don't have the staffing to help support children. But in public schools, we do see it often. I mean, I have a pretty good balance, I think all of us, of public school kids versus charter schools kids and such. And so we see everyone, but we are open to whatever school wants to have us and come educate them, talk about just mental health in general. I'm doing a presentation to school professionals like nurses and guidance counselors and such in the middle of September throughout Florida. That is being broadcast through Nemours, and just educating them on what to look for. So, we are reaching out to the schools, but, we are always open to whomever wants to have us.
Well, Jeanine Hoff, thank you so much for coming on the program today. We'll have information to those links that you mentioned on the First Coast Connect website, but we really appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Up next, a new legal counseling law is complicated and consequential, but those seeking affordable legal advice have a new option in St. Johns County. Here to tell us about it, Melissa Bergman, Communications Director with the St. Johns County Clerk of the Circuit Court. Hey, Melissa.
Hi, how are you?
Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Attorney Nancy Harrison, who specializes in family law. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. So, Nancy, what is the need as you see it when it comes to help in family court?
There are a lot of people who cannot afford an attorney, so they represent themselves. And family law is complex. It could last for the rest of your life. It deals with your children, your property, money for child support, alimony. It's complicated. So people who try to represent themselves need some assistance to walk through that process.
So I've only really seen people try to represent themselves, it's called pro se, in a criminal case. And just from observing, I know that it is very difficult, not just on the defendant, but on the judge, on the opposing counsel, because they're having to deal with somebody that just doesn't understand the rules of procedure. And as you say, that is really a complicated thing. I mean, that's why people go to law school. How does it play out for families who are trying to deal with these complex issues without advice?
It's the same for the judges, for the attorneys. The pro se parties are going to be held to the same standard we are because they have to know the rules of procedure. They have to know evidence rules. It's difficult for them. They come into court with a piece of paper that's technically hearsay. They brought one copy. The judge's not going to let it in. The attorney's going to know the objection to make. It will not come in. And people need to know, how do you get that piece of paper in? What do you have to do?
And so somebody might, for instance, bring some phone records and say this person has been harassing me or they have been calling me when they're not allowed to call me. But to your point, that would not be permitted in to a court of law. A judge isn't allowed to accept it because it doesn't, by its face, meet the rules of the standard.
Right. So hearsay is an out-of-court statement that you offer to the court to prove the truth of what it was, whatever it is, whatever was said. So the only hearsay that can get in a particularly in a family law case very easily is whatever your opposing party said to you, because that is an exception. So if you have a husband and wife, you can talk about what they said to each other. Other people that are involved and might say something, there are ways you have to go about that to get that in.
You can't just bring in your neighbor who will tell us something unless you've gone through the procedure properly.
Right.
So, Melissa, tell us about what the clerk of the court saw in terms of a need here for free legal counsel in family court and what this program was designed to do?
So, this program was designed with the residents in mind. We often see that there is some confusion as to our role in family law matters. So, we are very, very limited in the legal assistance that we can provide. So, we do recommend that anyone coming in with more complex questions about, their individual situation seek counsel. And because that is something that we say, people are very confused as to where do we start? What do we do? How do we get this information? And now with some of the availability of the pro se parameters, we thought it would be a great way for us to help residents and be able to offer this free educational resource to anyone that has questions about navigating their legal process.
Because in the clerk's office, I'm guessing you get a lot of people coming in, they're trying to fill out their paperwork, they have questions about what they can do or bring to court, and you're really not legally allowed to answer those questions.
That is correct. We do have to let everyone know that they do need to speak with an attorney for anything outside of the scope of our work.
Right. And so how does this program work if somebody comes to the clerk's office and they're just starting in on a case? What kind of cases are covered and how do they access the assistance that's available?
So we direct them to the St. Johns County Legal Aid if they have any questions or concerns of things that we cannot answer. So this workshop was created to welcome residents and have them ask questions to a practicing attorney right then and there.
Mm-hmm. And so is it, are there numbers of attorneys available or is it mostly you, Nancy, that's handling this burden? How does it work?
Now, for what we're doing, the luncheon workshop is I'm just doing it till the end of the year, and then we'll regroup.
Mm-hmm.
But I help with St. Johns County Legal Aid, and there are a lot of attorneys out there that help with what we do there. We have a pro se class once a month, and that is to help people fill out those forms. Because if they're not filled out correctly, and you don't ask for the relief you need, you're not going to get it. So, and we can give a little legal advice about what's going on.
Yeah.
And then if there's any cases that the attorneys think that maybe this person really needs an attorney, things are a little different, a little harder to deal with as a pro se person, there is a committee that decides, and sends it out to the attorneys and says, hey, can anybody take this case?
Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, we're talking about a new series of workshops that's being held to help residents in St. Johns County who are in family court. If you have questions or comments, you can reach us at 904-549-2937, or you can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Nancy, I want to ask you about what kinds of cases are acceptable for someone to try to manage themselves. You're talking about advice, perhaps these sessions where someone can come in with the forms, get advice about how to fill them out correctly, but then they could be capable of handling it on their own?
We always recommend that they at least talk to an attorney to get some legal advice, even if it's just an overview of the case. But, I mean, technically, you can represent yourself. But part of this workshop is to go over all those things you need to know. What can the judge do? What the judge can't do? What they expect you to do in the courtroom, your behavior, your attire. Teach them a little bit about evidence. I mean, it would take, a whole semester of law school to teach someone all of that, but enough that they could do it on their own. Mm-hmm. So it covers a lot of things, and, people represent themselves all the time.
And Melissa, we talked about, this is family court, but what are the parameters of family court? I mean, that covers divorce, as we said, child custody, adoption. What else is in that mix?
It would be for asset separation, some time sharing stuff, and whatever else falls under the family law matters for that specific case.
Is domestic violence included?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, paternity cases, and there are a realm of domestic violence cases now. It's not all just violence. There's stalking, all kind of things that people can file.
And one of the things that she is going over in these workshops is some of the statutes falling under domestic violence and family law matters, so people can get a better understanding of some of the legal jargon that's used in the rules.
And so is this primarily the focus right now of the clerk's office, is family law for these type of advisory workshops, or are you going to be branching out and expanding to other kinds of areas of the court system?
So at the moment, it is the family law workshop that we're focusing on. But I do have a few things up my sleeve that I'm hoping to bring into the clerk's office initiatives at the beginning of next year.
Can you give us a hint?
I can't at the moment, but I do have a few other divisions that I'm working with right now to try and fine tune some options.
Yeah.
To, work with the St. Johns County Legal Aid as well.
And so I would guess, I can't guess which those departments are, but I would guess that there probably is some limit in terms of you wouldn't implement this necessarily in a criminal court setting.
That is correct.
Yeah. That's just too complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. And consequential. But as you say, Nancy, I mean, this will direct the people's individuals' lives forever, including whether they live with their children or whether
Right.
they own property. So
Right.
it's
Division of assets, what you pay in child support, how to prepare for that. What do you need? What kind of documents do you need to present to the judge so they can determine a child support number?
And
Yeah.
so what is the metric for determining whether this is a successful program? Is it like the number of people that are participating? How do you decide if it's doing any good?
So right now, I'm really just looking at the engagement. We obviously had our first workshop at the beginning of August, and we had 22 participants, which was fabulous. And they were very engaging. A lot of really great questions. Some were about injunctions. Some were about substance abuse in, a specific family law case. Just a lot of really great questions. So I'm basing it off of the engagement and some of the topics that are brought up by residents with some of their confusion and how we're navigating answering those questions and diving into those topics.
Well, Nancy Harrison, Melissa Bergman, thank you so much for coming up to tell us about this program. Really appreciate it. The most important measures of river health is often invisible, but river grass was the focus of a recent expedition. And here to talk about it, I'm joined by St. John's River Keeper, Lisa Reineman. Hi, Lisa.
Good morning.
Good morning. So you were here in May ahead of this seagrass appraisal. Remind us what you were hoping to find and what evidence you were looking for.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, submerged aquatic vegetation is the foundation of the St. Johns River's health and all of our waterways. And so we actually go out and monitor an 80-mile section of the St. Johns looking for these grasses because unfortunately they've been struggling and nearly disappeared after Hurricane Irma.
Yeah. And so what stretch of the St. Johns are we talking about? It's not really this part in Jacksonville. Is that true?
We actually start in Doctors Lake, so just south of Jacksonville in Clay County, and we go all the way upriver to Lake George, which is in Putnam County.
And upriver being south because of the way our river flows. Okay.
That's right. And so we actually go to 14 different sites, and these are people's docks. So we actually meet with homeowners on a regular basis. And so we've actually been out in the river 2 times since we met back in May.
Oh, okay, cool. And so what is the assessment that you've come away with now?
Well, there's it ebbs and flows, but there's good news and bad news. And so the good news is all 14 sites that we went to, both in May and August, had presence of eelgrass or SAV and different types of submerged aquatic vegetation.
SAV,
submerged aquatic vegetation.
Okay.
And so, yay, that's really good, exciting to see. Canopy heights, meaning the heights of these grasses, have actually improved on about half the sites, so another good sign. But unfortunately, we're still seeing some troubling things that we need to address one way or the other. And that's ultimately what we need to get to is what can we do to make sure our river's in balance and healthy enough for these grasses to thrive, to provide the biofiltration and fish habitat that we all want our river to have.
What do you most want to see? What would help you the most in order to bring grasses back and to help them rebound from that storm?
Yeah, so some of the things we saw is where there's high turbidity, so the watercolor's not as clear as it can be. That can be from dirt runoff from construction sites. That can also be from harmful algal blooms. It can get in the water column. In fact, half of our sites had active harmful algal blooms with 5 different types of potentially toxic cyanobacteria. And so all of these things add additional stress. And so we need to do things to make sure the fresh saltwater balance is in check with the river to let these grasses thrive. But also we're keeping things out of the river that don't belong, like dirt and nutrient pollution that causes these harmful algal blooms, which blocks sunlight from these grasses.
And we've talked before about salinity. How are you seeing impacts, if at all, from the river dredging or just generally rising sea levels?
So we're seeing it in twofold. One is the salinity. So as we dredge the river deeper, it gives the Atlantic Ocean more tidal force to go further inland. And so we are seeing these saltwater intrusion impacts killing off grasses, and also higher water levels. When you have higher water levels from whether it's dredging or rain events or sea level rise, which it's multiple things, then the higher water is eliminating the light to get down to these grasses. And so we need to do everything to make sure we're doing our part here locally to protect and keep pollution out of the river, but also on a more global level to stop and do our part to fight climate change. Because not only are we seeing higher water levels and salt water going upstream, we're also seeing higher temperatures. Half of our sites had temperatures that were too high for healthy submerged aquatic vegetation growth. And so we need to do everything we can at a local as well as global level to protect our St. Johns River for future generations.
I wonder if we see a lot more heavy rainfalls. Sometimes they say the rainfall hasn't increased overall, but a lot of times it's happening at a giant intensity, right?
Right.
Does that in any way help offset the salinity when you're seeing a heavy rainfall and kind of balance out the system a little bit?
Well, rainfall definitely helps balance out the fresh saltwater regime, but it needs to be at a slower pace because unfortunately, when you have these very high deluges of rain coming in, not only does it give more fresh water in the river, which is good, but it also washes in more nutrients from our yards, from agricultural land. And also we have a lot of swampland, which is really great for our river. There's, our swamplands and freshwater wetlands are critically important. But when you have a lot of rain at one time, you get a lot of tannins and darker water, and that blocks out the light, like we mentioned. And so we like to see slower rainfall on a more city basis as opposed to these really heavy, high frequency rains.
And just briefly, I wanted to ask you, because we talked previously about these fences that are kind of put around some of the grasses to prevent them from being devoured or sometimes destroyed by marine life. And you've seen some success with those.
Absolutely. In fact, there are 2 sites right now that have the enclosures that are part of our sample area, and one of them is doing great. I mean, the grass looks like what the submerged grasses historically looked like in the St. John, so it's just so rewarding to literally jump out and hang out in these grasses and measure them. Unfortunately, the other site's not doing as well. We're actually seeing the grasses loosely rooted, which is a new finding. So we need to understand what's going on there. But we are looking to install, and we're almost done with the permitting process to install 10 of these protective enclosures in this 80-mile section so we can take water quality data and understand if reducing grazer pressure will help these grasses up and down.
On the next Fresh Air, our series Classic Films and Movie Icons continues, featuring interviews from our archive with Dennis Hopper, who made his movie comeback with the film Blue Velvet, and Isabella Rossellini, who starred in that film too. She's the daughter of 2 other movie icons, actress Ingrid Bergman and director Roberto Rossellini. Join us
today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Next in our special series, Elements of Energy, why Indonesia believes nickel could pave the way to political and economic independence.
We were colonized for 350 years. In the next 70 years, we are just still producing commodities, which was the reason why we were colonized. Something has to change.
The promise of nickel in our series, Elements of Energy, that's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. What if another January 6th happened, only this time with a split in military loyalty? That's the subject of a new documentary called War Game.
If we deny that it could happen again, guess what? We're unprepared for what could happen.
We'll talk with former Senator Heidi Heitkamp and other military and political leaders next time on The Middle.
Tonight at 9 here on WJCT News 89.9.
Kids are going back to school and back to a habit that's alarming doctors. Energy drinks are now a staple for many students. This craze for caffeine is being fueled by companies who target adolescents. Some countries now want to ban the sale of these drinks to those under the age of 16. Should the U.S. do the same? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
JCT. She hosts and produces the Jack's Music Hour Saturday nights at 8. But Hurley Winkler is a woman with many creative irons in the fire, and here to tell us about her latest. Hurley Winkler, welcome.
Thank you so much, Anne.
I'm so glad to have you here. So you've been working on a novel since 2020.
That's
But this
correct.
this project's actually a zine that's based off of your own journaling. So how did you start to work on this simultaneously to working on your novel?
Yeah, well, I've always journaled ever since I was a kid. I've always been really interested in writing in a diary ever since I read the book Harriet the Spy in fourth grade. That
Aw,
really started
great.
me writing. I was writing about, things I was noticing just in my day to day life. And then
Charlie the
just,
Spy.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, Hurley the Spy. Then started kind of spying on what was going on inside of me, too, in
Oh.
my own thoughts and emotions. And it really was a coping mechanism for me as a kid with a lot of anxiety and swirly thoughts.
Uh-huh.
And so I've always written in a journal. It's always been something I've done just to care for myself. And it's something I've always done simultaneously with writing fiction.
So that's a very personal journey, but this is something that you've turned into a zine that's published and is actually available in hard copy. It's called 100 Swims. So tell us about where the title came from and what the conceit is of the zine itself.
So the zine is taken from diary entries from last summer, so summer of 2023. And during that summer, I set 3 goals for myself. I was trying to write my journal every day without missing a day. I wanted to finish a novel I'd been working on since 2020, like you mentioned. And I wanted to go swimming 100 times, which I knew was a pie in the sky goal, but was also kind of, I don't know, tantalizingly attainable. It felt like something maybe I actually could do. And so when I say swimming, I don't necessarily mean like swimming for exercise, more like just bobbing around in the water. And I wanted to put myself in the water so much because I knew I'd be at my desk a lot because I was trying to finish this book that I'd been working on for a long time. I was writing in my journal a lot. So I wanted to do something that would get me outside of those confines of my desk and out in the water. And it really, really did help during that time.
And so the zine, which you actually have here a copy of, it has a graphic on the cover that sort of depicts your swimming efforts. And you have this great line in the zine that says, by intending to swim 100 times, I swam 78. So it's kind of this chronicle of persistence. You didn't get all the way there, but each day you would fill out these little squares that are the cover of the zine to
Right.
track your progress.
Yeah, and that's kind of become a metaphor for me, just in various aspects of life. You can set a goal for yourself and maybe you don't reach perfection, but maybe you do the thing way more than you ordinarily would if you hadn't set that goal. And I've just noticed that translating in so many different ways outside of the water.
I think that there's an interesting theme in your writing in this scene. You kind of do this interplay with chronology and time, where you're talking, at one point you write a letter from 80-year-old you to you. And then you also kind of reference past you and future you about Instagramming things, in the past. And um, but then you kind of have this breakthrough you're also talking about in your own writing, where you are changing the approach to the way that you begin the book, where you kind of have a chapter before the chapter to sort of set up a different chronology. And so you're kind of playing with this idea, and then it manifests in the work you're doing. I thought that was just really interesting.
Oh, thanks. Thank you for noticing that. And thank you for reading the zine too. It's so amazing, because this has been a project I've been working on for a while now. To hear someone engaging with it finally, it's so rewarding. So thank you. And yeah, that kind of play with time has been, I think, one of the most rewarding aspects of this is looking back on that and noticing how I'm pulling those habits into the present day in my own journaling today too, and how that's impacting my writing and impacting my life in these big ways.
So where is the novel that you were working on throughout this journal that you were keeping?
Yeah, so I signed with a literary agent recently, and we're trying to sell the book now. We're trying to sell it to a publisher. So please keep your fingers crossed for me. It's a long journey and a slow one, but I'm really hoping it ends up in the right home soon.
Is there a title, a working title for it? Is it and can you tell us just a little bit about the plot?
Sure. It's called Plant Mom, and it's a story of a woman who lives in Jacksonville, Florida. It's a very funny and tender story. And she really desperately wants to have a child, but winds up treating a houseplant as her child and making YouTube videos about it. And that's a pretty zany thing to happen. So it stirs up a lot of conflict in her marriage. So it's also the story of a marriage.
Oh, that sounds great. You also have this zine release party that's coming up. And so I'm curious, is that something that it's an opportunity to sell the zine?
Oh,
Is it-
absolutely.
Okay.
I'd love for anyone listening to come out on Saturday, 6 to 8 p.m. at McKennu Chocolate, which is in Atlantic Beach across from Aqua East on Atlantic Boulevard. And it's going to be a great night. I'm going to read from the zine, and WJCT's own Matt Shaw is going to be DJing live that night. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited.
And so maybe he'll play a little of the song that we bumped in with. We should explain the song that we started this segment with.
Yes, this comes from a diary entry in the zine. It's a moment when I was kind of at my wits' end and was shamefully reporting back that my sweet husband, Alex, had been singing Gimme the Beat Boys and Free My Soul in the kitchen. And I just snapped at him when he was doing that. So I think it's funny, that's such a reward of journaling, is seeing the things that we were so ashamed of at one point that become just a funny thing to look back on too.
Well, it's a great read. Hurley Winkler, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Anne.
And that's our program. Join us tomorrow when we talk about the week's biggest headlines with our Week in Review panel of journalists. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
More than a century ago, a company called Calum helped Jacksonville become the winter film capital of the world, a reputation that lasted only a decade. Hear the fascinating true story on Bygone Jacks, Our Unsung History, a podcast from WJCT Public Media.
This is WJCT News 89.